Good evening. To coin a phrase and use a cheap pun, is British Columbia yet out of the woods in all its toils and tribulations in the lumber industry? Wasteful practices, the big boys getting favors, the Americans hammering us for that 15%. We'll find out tonight, but first, here's Ted with the rundown.
Telephone stores, women's accessories, and imported beers. Tonight, Webster talks to 3 entrepreneurs who started their own businesses and wouldn't have it any other way. Shirley Price, The Other Phone Store, Janice Blaney McShane, JP Pacific Agency, and Jerry Kieran's of the Fog and Suds. How to spot depression in the ones you love before it's too late. Webster talks about prevention and coping with Vancouver psychiatrist Dr. Shayla Misri. But first, did we win or lose with the 15% tax imposed on softwood lumber exports? The money stays in Canada, but who gets to spend it? Webster questions Jack Kempf, Provincial Minister of Lands and Forests.
And my normal positive, optimistic question, Mr. Kempf, how many jobs and how much trade have we lost with this 15% solution?
Well, to this point, we haven't lost any, Jack, and I'm very optimistic that we won't lose.
This is bad news for Mr. Zimmerman. Are you telling me the 15% is not affecting the demands for our lumber in the United States?
Not at this point, it sure isn't, Jack. In fact, orders are good, the price is up, and our sawmills are all running.
All right, what are you going to do? For years you sat in the back bench, muttered and nagged about the disgraceful state of BC's forests.
I wouldn't mutter and nag, you know that.
You did mutter and nag. Wasteful practices, not enough replanting, and you were a permanent critic.
Well, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, Jack.
All right, but first of all, tell me, how bad is the situation in our forest today? Because I see some fairly rough stuff in that green paper you put out for discussion.
Well, I wouldn't say it's bad. I would say changes are necessary, and certainly that's what we're about to do, make changes.
Wasteful harvesting practices.
Well, there's wood being wasted. I've said that. I've said that for many years. I knew that when I worked in the woods. We've got to find ways to counteract it.
140 million we get from revenue miserably, and you're spending 340 million of our money to keep the forests in whatever shape they are for the big boys.
Certainly that's true. That's why we have to have more money from the resource. And maybe the 15% is a godsend, Jack. Had it not been for the tariff, I would probably be doing these sorts of things now at any rate.
Just a minute, the 15%. Carney blinked, Zimmerman thinks you were dreadful, that you and Van der Zalm blew the gaff on the whole thing by pleading guilty at the beginning?
Absolutely not, and I think Pat Carney did a wonderful job. She arrived at the best deal possible. We had it on very good authority, Jack, that 15% was definitely the bottom line, and it could have been a lot worse. They were talking upwards to 35%. She struck a deal for 15%. I give her a lot of credit for that.
All right, now that 15% is going to kick in to us about how much a year? BC, I'm talking about.
Roughly $350 million.
That means it'll go to Ottawa in this tax and then come back to your coffers.
Well, right now that's what's happening, yes.
How many jobs are you going to create in the forest industry with that $350 million?
Well, I probably won't get it all, and I think our finance minister has said that already. And really, I don't want it all. Some of it's going back into the forests, definitely. But you can't alleviate a problem simply by throwing money at it. We're going to spend more money on reforestation. We're going to spend more money on seedling production and tree planting. However, I think it would be ridiculous to say that as well as what we're spending already, and we're spending a good deal, that we were going to throw another $350 million at reforestation.
Mind you, you have a problem because, as I recall, the provincial government never kept up with the supply of seedlings that the companies wanted to replant under the terms of the license.
We've got a backlog. Everybody admits that.
So how are you going to do it? Are you going to take one of your suggestions is that you take the tree planting away from the TFL holders?
Well, we're looking at Section 88, and it's Section 88 you're talking about, Jack.
Explain Section 88.
Well, Section 88 is a section of the Act that allows the companies to do certain reforestation and road building and discount that from their stumpage payment to the government. However, you must realize when stumpages are at a minimum, as they have been over the recessionary period, that means that some companies not only don't pay stumpage to the government of the province of British Columbia, they rack up a deficit. In fact, right now, well, I don't know exactly what the figure is, it's probably around $45 million that the province owes the operators because of Section 88. You know, I think that's wrong. And
there's I've spent $1 million. I'm a company, and I spend $1 million. And in that, I build some roads to your specifications, and I plant some trees, and I make some fire preparations, and I can deduct all the cost of that from the taxation of my timber.
Yes.
That's stupid.
Well, I think it is, and
with respect.
Well, yeah, and I think it is. I've always thought that. I've said it in the legislature prior, a lot of years prior to becoming the minister responsible, and I'm taking a serious look at making some sweeping changes in that area.
What about high grading? Is it not a fact that much high grading is done of the best timber, leaving the other stuff because it's
Jack, there are a number of things that, in my estimation, have gone on in our forests that shouldn't have. All I can say is that I am now the minister. I am taking a complete look at the industry, both inwardly in the BC Forest Service and outwardly in the industry, and I intend to make the changes necessary to bring proper forest management to the province of British Columbia.
No matter whom it upsets.
Well, upsets, no, I don't care who it upsets. I think it's incumbent upon government to ensure the people of British Columbia that their resource is being handled properly.
Now, the 15%. We put the 15% on here. The feds collect it. When and how will you start to take that 15% off? By replacing it to the satisfaction of the American interests with internal changes?
We're working on that right now.
How do you do it, though? You put up the stumpage.
No, well, you can do it in a number of ways. You can do it by putting up stumpage, by putting up rentals, by putting on a timber tax. You can do it in many ways, and certainly we're looking at all of those options now. I say we. I was just in Montreal on Monday at a meeting of the Canadian Council of Forest Ministers. Myself and 8 of the other 9 ministers were there at that meeting. We have put in place a working committee, one person from each of the provinces, from the federal government and from the territories, who will be looking at replacement measures and will be making recommendations to the Council of Forest Ministers. The first indication of what they may be recommending will come on March the 9th, which is the next meeting.
That's going to annoy the companies, the likes of, say, Mac and Blow, who presently are paying the 15% on the stuff they export. If you replace that with other levies, charges, and stumpage, that will hit them much harder than the 15%.
I don't see how it would, Jack. If we take 15%.
It'll apply to all products, not merely that stuff going to the
Well, we
States.
have to take a look at that as well, not necessarily apply it to all products. I think we have to be fair, and maybe not necessarily apply it to all areas of British Columbia. There again, we have to be fair, and I think there are some inequities there. That's why I say we're looking at the whole overall picture.
How long before you make your mark with legislation or changes in regulations like on that Section 88?
Well, I would hope that I don't have to bring in too much legislation. I think probably we've got too much legislation on the books now. I hope that I can make many of the changes within the Forest Act that we now have. If it's necessary, certainly I'll bring in legislation as early as the spring session.
A number of small operators in the interior around the Columbia are unhappy because some Chinese and I think Canadian interests bought a pulp mill for $90 million.
Yes, they did.
But the tree farm license, which belonged to Webster, as did the pulp mill, was left there. And the allegation is that Webster are using that purely as log brokers and that you should do something else with that tree farm license up there.
Well, that tree farm license, of course, was issued originally to supply their sawmill. They still have it. The pulp mill was bought without a timber supply.
That's funny, isn't it?
Well, it may be funny, but it was a business deal, Jack, and it's one that I, as Minister of Forests and Lands, don't get involved in. The only way I would have gotten involved in that particular purchase would have been if there would have been timber involved. Then I'd have had to put my signature on the dotted line to say whether it should or shouldn't be done. However, having said that, the company CITIC of China and the Eastern Concerns are coming in to see me soon, I'm told, and there will be, I would suspect in the future, some kind of pulp agreement. Right now, the pulp mill is buying its needs from all of the other mills, including the Celgar sawmill in the area, and that's healthy. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But we will, and we assured these people, and that's the only thing we assured them of when they bought the pulp mill, that they would have a supply of pulp in order to keep that pulp mill running.
I'll ask you about China after the break, and I'll take calls too. Question for the environmentalists. Are you going to log the ecological reserve, so-called, in Windy Bay on Lyle Island?
No, we're not going to log the ecological reserve, Jack, and that's why we had no problems with the Haida moving materials to build a longhouse onto that particular area, because it was planned to be an ecological reserve anyway. We're not going to log, and we never have planned to log, those areas that are sensitive on Lyle Island. The rest of it is planned for logging, yes.
But you'll leave enough around Windy Bay so that the seabirds and whatnot won't be upset.
That's always been the plan.
Is that enough to keep the Haidas and the environmentalists happy?
Well, I'm sure. I haven't heard anything else from the Haidas.
One sentence in China, please. You're just back from your junket.
No, I'm sorry. I didn't take languages there.
No, but on China.
On China? You want some information
Any
on
order
China?
papers? Any
Fantastic trip, Jack. I was kept very, very busy. The Chinese are very interested in British Columbians and British Columbia lumber and logs. They have backed off their original wish to have only raw materials. They're now talking about lumber as well as some raw materials from British Columbia. I think that's great.
Go ahead from Swantula, I think it is.
Yes, Jack. When the Small Business Act first began, we ran into a lot of hostility and indifference from local foresters. Well, this situation really hasn't changed in the last 7 years. Now we're running into log brokers and quota holders taking people off the streets and using their license to bid against us, bid us out of our timber we've been waiting for.
I'm aware of that, sir.
Pardon?
I'm aware of that.
I'm glad you are. Can we get together a Small Business Act committee that reports directly to the minister, so we don't have to go through all these bureaucrats, and we can have some local input anyway?
Well, we're going to make sweeping changes as far as our own organization is concerned, and I'm a firm believer in local autonomy. But that local person, whoever it might be, has to be cognizant of the fact that you people out there in industry, big, small, or otherwise, are our clients. And whatever you do has to be in conjunction with the client's needs. I think that will filter down. It can't happen tomorrow. It's going to happen over time. But certainly, sir, it's going to help your situation. Input. I look forward to input from anyone at any time. My door is open.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead, please.
Yes, two questions, Mr. Kempf.
Yes,
the
sir.
first question is, are you still in favor of private scaling versus public scaling, as in Shoal Island? That's one situation where you've got the foxes guarding the chicken coop. And the second question is, on this 15%, one of the reasons I think the Americans blew the whistle is that disgraceful setup you've got in Dawson Creek with the Louisiana Pacific thing, a $25 million grant. Are you people in that?
Well, 2020 is really good vision. That's hindsight. That's been done. It's over and done with, and I don't wish to comment on it. As far as the scaling situation is concerned, we're reviewing all of the scaling matters in this province, the way we do it, whether in fact it should be done, whether there are better ways of selling our timber, cheaper ways that there's less paperwork, less hurdles. We're looking at that whole situation.
Mind you, you may dodge the question, but many people were perturbed by the $20 million loan to build a wafer board plant.
I understand that, Jack, but I'm just saying it was done, and there's not much we can do about it.
Is it going to work?
I certainly hope so. I see why not. I don't see why it shouldn't. They're making a product that is rising in popularity on world markets. They're making it out of a tree that was considered a weed in the past. I don't think it can help but be successful.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, hi, Mr. Kemp. It's encouraging to hear that you're planning reform in the forest industry. I'm wondering if you're going to take into consideration such things as wildlife habitat and watershed protection, and look at policies such as in Alaska, where you have, for instance, eagle nesting, and they preserve a hectare of forest around any eagle nest.
Yes.
The question is, or statement is perhaps the fact that companies are so adamant about logging Mears Island is a clear indication of just the state of our resource right now.
Yes, certainly, and we're cognizant that there are other users out there in our forests, and I would say any policy that we put in place will take that into consideration.
Okie dokie. I have another one here from the Slocan Valley Watershed Alliance. You've got lots of these pressure groups on you.
Yes?
But which comes first, jobs or the environment?
Well, I think they're both important. And I think we can have the best of both worlds, Jack, through cooperation and communication. Certainly we can't have it through confrontation. And unfortunately, a lot of these groups, and I'm not saying this one is one of them, but a lot of these groups are only interested in confrontation, some of them for political purposes.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, Mr. Kemp,
Yes, sir.
you signed an order in council there to export our raw cedar logs now. And now the federal government has said, no, you can't do that. What is going to be the saw-off here? Who's going to win this battle?
No, you're wrong, sir. A order in council was signed for certain logs to be exported, certain cedar logs. That was done prior to a federal order which came through, which now prohibits us from exporting any cedar logs, so we really don't have any say over
But
it.
they're wrong in that. These were not going for shingle blocks, they were going for export, weren't they?
That's right.
Well, they were supposed to have been bug-infested, were they not?
Bugs, sir, don't infest cedar logs.
Ambrosia does.
Well, not to the point where they're going to be a detriment.
Just by the way, while we're talking about shakes and shingles, have you any thought of trying to get the Americans to drop that 35% on, even though it hasn't killed the industry?
Certainly, I wish to talk to Pat Carney about that because it hasn't killed the industry. I understand it's not helping it any, but it certainly hasn't hurt it to any extent.
If you could have
However, the fact of the matter is, Jack, that 35% is going to the U.S. of A. And if there's any tariff on anything going out of British Columbia or Canada for that matter, it should come back to the provinces involved.
Go ahead from Chilliwack.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah. Regarding this export permit stuff here, I have an export permit in my hand here saying that I can export fir, cedar, hemlock, and now they say I can't. No, I don't understand it because I'm doing a high development cost project here.
Sir, I know who you are and I know your situation, and I'll be speaking to the Premier about it tomorrow.
Well, who's got to take the bath on it, eh?
Right now, well, it's not us that have made that decision. We passed Order in Council 1275. I didn't do it. It was done by my predecessor, but it was done by the ministry back in the spring, before the federal government brought in their regulations. It's my estimation that we should not stop you from so doing, but I have to speak to the Premier and to Pat Carney about that.
How much of a bath will you take?
Oh, $25,000 right off the top, just what I got in the water.
I fully understand it. I'm cognizant of your situation and intend to do something about it.
Thank you very much for your call. Good calls tonight. Lady Smith.
Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
I also wish to discuss the thing in the Times Colonist that says Ottawa slaps ban on cedar exports until review done. I feel that you, Mr. Kemp, feel that no one has come to any harm with this 35% export duty. I would totally disagree with you. We are a major raw block cutter, and everyone on this island has taken quite a bath. Your people on the other side maybe haven't, but we have, and you're not investigating it properly, number one. And number two, after a 4.5-month shutdown, which we didn't make any money on, you can't cross the picket line, Are you sitting there willing to say that you can put up your stumpage rates, which get passed on to us, and also what are you proposed to do with it with Ms. Corney?
Well, firstly, the ban on cedar shingles logs to the United States wasn't put on by us, as you said yourself. It was put on by the federal government. I said a few minutes ago, I wish to talk to Pat Carney about that because I think it's ridiculous. The 35% is going to the United States. It's not helping British Columbia. The people buying those cedar shingles in the United States are paying 35% more. It's hurting their consumers. It's hurting both sides of the border. I think it's got to be addressed. I certainly am willing to address it.
Are you going to try and see Carney about it?
Number one, when are you going to address it, and how much are we going to have to hurt before you can get around to it?
I'm going to address it immediately, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Jack Kemp. You're going to be a busy man.
Yes?
And a few promises to keep.
That's fine.
My thanks to Jack Kemp. I'll be back after the break. In my mood of positive enthusiasm and regeneration, BC Development Corporation is holding a conference for entrepreneurs that can include you at Richmond Inn over the weekend. Here's a little piece prepared by Ted on 3 people you're going to see live shortly.
Paula, it's Janice. How are you doing?
Starting a business with only a telephone and a car might seem pretty daring, but not to Janice Blaney McShane. Several years ago, she found herself unemployed and set out to sell women's accessories to local boutiques. Her first sale brought a commission of only $9, but from there she was hooked. Janice now owns JB Pacific Agency and represents 7 lines of accessories, including sunglasses, handbags, and costume jewelry. She says starting off small, with no money and no experience, actually contributed to her success. Polish came with experience, but she still offers the personalized service which her customers have come to expect.
I think that's why my business has been successful. It's because of the fact that over a period of time I haven't changed that attitude. The service that I've given them and the amount of follow-up that I do certainly makes them feel like they're important to me.
Let's see, Australia, Canada, China, Czechoslovakia, Norway, Switzerland, United Kingdom. 225 beers listed on this menu here at the Fog and Suds restaurant, and I can't find root beer anywhere. Nonetheless, it's a vast selection of beer that the 3 Fog and Suds restaurants are all about, and they've proven amber gold mines to Jerry Kieran's and his partners. The first Fog and Suds opened in Kitsilano only 3 years ago. That restaurant proved such a success that 2 more quickly followed, and even more are planned for the future. And although restaurants are always high-risk ventures at the best of times, according to Kieran's, the recession itself was a contributing factor to his success.
In many ways, the tail end of the recession worked in our advantages. There were a great number of restaurants that were available, secondhand restaurants, so to speak, on 25 or 30 cents on the dollar. And we found one that was in receivership, and it was in Kitsilano, and we figured if Kitsilano wouldn't go for exotic beers from around the world, nobody would in Vancouver, and our instincts proved true.
Today, with deregulation and the rapidly changing telecommunications industry, you can buy, rent, or lease a telephone. And it's all thanks to a group of entrepreneurs who had the guts to take on the telephone company. One of these people is Shirley Price of the Other Phone Store. Although it's never been illegal to sell a phone in Canada, prior to 1979, there just wasn't anybody selling them. And that made the telephone sales business a market just waiting to be exploited.
There are not many industries that you can get into today, or as you look down the future, where every home and every business requires one, and yet they've never had the opportunity to buy one. That gives you a large marketplace from which to pull.
Since 1979, competition in the phone boutique business has remained steep, most notably from the former monopoly, BC Tel. But Shirley has another company, CanWest Communications, which caters to the lucrative market of business telephone systems, while still offering one of the widest selections of novelty phones.
Now, here are my 3 guests in the studio. Janice Blaney McShane, Jerry Kieran's, and Shirley Price. Now, are you going to lecture at this conference?
Yes, I am.
Give me your lecture.
Give me your lecture.
In other words, you told a very nice little story there that you were kind of broke, out of a job and all that kind of thing, and just decided to up and start a business.
Well, I mean, when you're broke and you're out of a job, you've got to do something. Either you send out your resumes and you go and you get a job somewhere else, or else you develop something that can bring some income in for you. I think if you are organized and you have an idea, I think it's interesting to pursue it and see whether or not that can bring you a...
When did you get the idea? What had you been doing before?
My background is in retail, so what I did before came naturally to take me through to this phase because I had dealt with retailers and wholesalers, and as an agent, I followed through with that same line.
Money, money, money. You didn't really just start with... well, how much money did you start your business with?
I didn't start with anything.
Well, you had to get a place to rent.
No, I didn't. No, I didn't, because when I first started, my goods are packed in small suitcases or small bags or whatever, and I just simply packed them into my car and off I went.
First you had to buy your goods. How did you get them on consignment?
You don't buy your goods.
Oh,
No.
see, I know nothing about it.
On consignment, and you basically take the wares from the manufacturer,
You go to the buyers.
go to the retailers, to the buyers, show them your wares, and at the end of the season you give back your samples to the manufacturers.
But the skill, of course, is in picking the right samples from the right manufacturers with the right price and the right markup and the right commission.
It's a very difficult process, and I think that that's the most important thing, is that when you're first starting out in this business, you do the research necessary to find out what the marketplace wants, and then you fill that
How many
gap.
lines did you handle now?
I handle about 8 now.
8 now. And how much have you expanded since that first day when you first got some samples and went round?
Well, I've expanded. I now have a showroom. I had a car and a telephone. Now I have a showroom, and I also have a salesperson working with me, and I have about 9 lines, 8 or 9 lines.
Well, you must have a certain ineffable sense of the right thing to buy, to get that will sell.
Well, I think I've developed it.
It was easier for you, Jerry, wasn't it?
Well, it's characteristic of you, Jack, to talk about investments. I think there is an investment of assets that are important to get into business, but I think primarily one of the hidden agenda things that I'd like to say at this conference this weekend is that one of the most important investments of assets you're going to make is the investment of yourself and your capacity to work.
What had you been before?
Well, my background is quite varied also. After graduation from university, I worked for Statistics Canada for 5 years.
University, civil servant.
And then I became a high school teacher.
High school teacher.
Coquitlam for 5 years. But there's kind of a development there, working from first the federal government, then a little bit more autonomy, working as a teacher, and then ultimately making the step where you're your own boss.
You had a partner when you decided you were going to go into a winery or something, weren't you?
Yeah, ironically, we had, it was a colleague who was a teacher, and we had decided that we wanted to get into our own business, and we went down to Oregon to check out the possibility of opening up a winery. We found that the capital investment was a little bit prohibitive, so we stumbled upon a small pub in Portland, Oregon that had about 20 beer from around the world, and we were so excited about this, we debated the possibility of using this as an avenue into our own business.
There's no such thing as a new idea. You saw an idea and you developed it up here.
Sort of. I think you have to create a demand for your product, and that's done through creative advertising and establishing excitement in the marketplace.
I understand that you have a small presentation to make to me.
Well, it's a Frog and Suds Scottish survival kit, and I thought you might be interested.
As a matter of fact, I can say without fear or favor of contradiction that while I have been known to take an occasional modest sherry, I don't normally drink beer. On this occasion, however, I'm so entranced. Can you get that one? You see it?
The surname is...
Can you read it? Can you get in? Oh, good, you got it focused. Webster's Yorkshire Bitter. You sell that in your pub?
It's one of 230 that we have in our restaurant.
230 bottles of this?
230 different brands, and they're not all named Webster. And this is a corporate Frog and Suds tie.
Frog and Suds tie.
We don't want you to tie one on tonight.
No,
but
never drive a car when you're
enjoy
wearing
one
that
when
tie.
you get home.
And Scottish Pride.
And that beer is noted as the best beer from Scotland.
How far have you expanded and how long?
We opened in October of '83 with our first location and we just recently opened up our third location this past December.
What's your most expensive bottle of beer?
You'll shudder at the price, but it's $15.95.
You gotta be joking.
No, and it's worth every penny, believe
What
it or not.
is it?
It's a beer called Edel, and it's from West Germany, and it's touted as the world's most expensive beer, and its other positioning statement is the cognac of beers.
What does it taste like? Cognac or beer?
Well, it's a very heavy, robust beer, and it's something that one would have after dinner.
Kind of like Guinness or Porter?
Oh, no,
or...
much more flowery than a Guinness, and a little bit stronger.
You want to sell franchises? Get into the big money?
We're at a very crucial business decision point in our corporate
Any government
lives.
help? Little
No.
bit?
No, not really.
BCDC or something?
No, well, through this conference perhaps, but basically you do it on your own.
Now we come to Shirley Price. You were the one that tackled the big one.
Yes, that's right.
When did you start it all? What made you think of it?
It started in 1980, and at that time, no one could own a telephone. You can only rent from BC Tel. And if you ever thought of renting a phone for 20 years, you'll realize the economics. As my mom said to me the other day, she said, I've paid almost $1,000 for this phone that I could have bought for $39.
So when deregulation came, that opened it up for everybody. But there was more than you went into the business of tackling
That's
the
right.
BC Tel.
Well, I bought a franchise of the other phone store, and together we all applied to the CRTC to make this an industry. And in May 1981, we did get the first permission from the CRTC, but then it was still a long uphill battle with BC Tel.
How many stores do you have now?
Right now, I have two. I have the original one I opened. I have Can West Telephone Company, which is my commercial enterprise.
Well, that's where you sell the equipment.
Yeah, I sell that type of thing to businesses. And I'm now the owner of the other phone store on Main Street in Vancouver because the franchisors went out of business.
Were you another one that had pretty low on finances when you went into business?
That's right, Jack. I was divorced, had a small child, just arrived in the country. All the strikes against me.
How many employees have you got now in your various operations?
It goes and comes, but between them, almost 20.
But if I get a phone from you and it doesn't work, the phone company won't fix it for me, will they?
No, but we'll fix the ones you get from them.
But they'll fix them too.
Yes, and we'll fix from them, and we'll fix from anywhere else, and we'll fix our own. We do a great deal of repairs.
The only thing is you can't work on the equipment in the house.
Oh, yes. You bring in any type of home phone.
No, but I mean, if there's something wrong with my wiring in the house, telephone company's got to do that, has it?
No. You can run in your own wire. You have to have the first run from BC Tel.
Listen, you're going to be lecturing too?
Yes.
Janice Blaney McShane, your brother's on the line, but I haven't. Do you want to talk to him?
No, I've talked to him.
Good. I didn't particularly want to talk to him either. We'll give him my best regards.
I will.
My thanks to Janice Blaney McShane, JB Pacific Agency, Jerry Kieran's of the Fog and Suds restaurant, and his $16 beer if you go crazy, right? And to Shirley Price of the other phone store and Can West Communications. I know you'll have a big success, and maybe other people will get some inspiration from you obviously delightful, efficient people. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll be back after the break. I have with me tonight Dr. Shaila Misri, who is a UBC professor of psychiatry. And there's a big conference coming up, when is it?
Saturday, the 31st of January.
Saturday, but unfortunately we're going to give it some publicity, but it's all sold out. It's obviously in great demand. It deals with all kinds of things, including stress of the 36-hour day, the contraceptive crisis, and all these other happy subjects, PMS, tension. Dr. Misri herself, though, deals with depression as one facet of your job, and you'll be discussing this at the conference.
That's correct.
Well, now, is depression really a definable psychiatric illness, or is it merely phases that each and every one of us goes through from time to time, depending on your biorhythms and how things are going?
To a psychiatrist, Jack, depression can be clearly defined. It's not just feeling unhappy because it's raining in Vancouver.
Or something's gone wrong.
Or something has gone wrong. But it's a cluster of symptoms, signs and symptoms that a clinician can pick up, observe, and treat.
Mind you, varying degrees of it. Everyone gets depressed from time to time, and it will pass off.
That's true. The kind of depression that we as psychiatrists talk does, however, need treatment. Most depressions do go away by themselves, but the struggle is really the person who experiences it will tell you how tough it is, and people prefer to be treated.
Well, what is the way to treat depression? Because having been well brainwashed by everything I've seen and read, it would seem that depression is often treated dangerously with massive or steady continuing prescriptions for drugs which don't really help. Am I wrong?
I'm afraid you are. I'm afraid you are. Because depending on the kind of depression one suffers from, let's say if you have depressions that are due to a marriage breakdown, or you get depressed because you've lost a job, naturally the medications or antidepressants are not going to cure you. But if you have a chemical imbalance in the brain, okay, something like, some people who suffer from diabetes have a chemical imbalance. People who suffer from depression have a chemical imbalance, and that kind of depression can be most successfully treated with medications.
Can these chemical imbalances now be properly, tested?
Yes, they can be.
What are the deficiencies which cause a chemical imbalance?
Well, the theory is that the brain produces certain kinds of substances, what we call neurotransmitters. And if a person is deficient for whatever reason in producing the neurotransmitter, then what the drugs do in ways that is quite unclear to us increases the production of neurotransmitters that regulate your mood.
Mm-hmm. That's a tricky. I haven't heard much about that before. I didn't realize that the chemical imbalance, diabetes, what else would cause it? Alzheimer's? No.
I gave diabetes as an example, but that does not, of course, diabetes also can cause a depression. Alzheimer's disease is completely different. Depression can be a part of Alzheimer's disease, but it doesn't certainly cause a depression.
Is intense psychotherapy needed to treat, what can you call it? Chemical imbalance to depression? No.
Psychotherapy in itself can be or is indicated when one needs support, and we all do, whether you're depressed or not. So just by giving somebody a pill for depression doesn't cure them either. I think a good doctor-patient relationship and what we call psychotherapy is
First of all, a
important.
physical checkup would seem to be absolutely essential.
It is.
For someone who hasn't previously suffered from any noticeable depression.
True, and many of the medical diseases or medical conditions can also mimic a depression.
This is a silly question. Is it easy to spot in your family or your friends cases of acute depression?
Acute, yes. It is not difficult if it's a short onset kind of depression where, let's say somebody had just delivered a child, and within the first couple of weeks, a woman comes home when she's expected to feel happy and elated that she has a child, suddenly starts crying for no reason, cannot sleep, cannot feed her baby, and cannot eat, then we say something is wrong here. And the first person who probably would spot would be the person who's living with her.
Taking it one step forward, not trying to be dreadfully miserable or depressed about it, is it possible that depression can lead to further, more drastic self-inflicted injury?
Yes, very much so. In fact, the concern of every healthcare person, or let's say us as psychiatrists, that is our major concern, because about 15% of people who get depressed at some point in time in their life are going to be prone to suicide.
But people talk about suicide when they don't mean it.
That's not true at all. If people talk about suicide, that's the first clue that they may be seriously ill in the context of depression.
Yeah, it's really what proportion of the population suffers? I have bad days, I'll tell you now and again, but what proportion of the population, women, suffer from this?
About 15 to 20%. At some point in time in their life are going to experience a depression.
And will require?
And will require treatment.
If not psychotherapy, some other kind of good doctor-patient relationship to assure
well,
them.
or if it's a chemical imbalance, then medications.
More and more they're discovering this chemical imbalance too as one of the causes of other psychiatric disorders. Am
That's
I
true.
correct?
Schizophrenia, for instance.
They haven't got a firm answer to that one yet, though, either, have they? I remember
no.
all the treatments that people, certain doctors used to recommend for schizophrenia, but I don't think it ever came to anything, did it?
Which treatment are you referring to now,
I
Jack?
was thinking of, I better not mention the doctor's name, and I can't remember the treatment, but what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take, will you take some telephone calls on this
Oh,
topic?
sure, sure.
Dr. Shaila Misri, UBC Professor of Psychiatry, about this woman-to-woman conference, which I'm told is all sold out.
I'm afraid I believe so, yes.
Quite popular. After the break. Dr. Sheila Misri, we're talking about the acute stages or any stages of depression, right? Mm-hmm. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I was wondering about the chemical imbalances she mentioned that cause depression. How was that found out that it's a chemical imbalance, and are these chemical imbalances treated with drugs such as Cinequan, amitriptyline, I believe is how you pronounce it? And like I said, how do they find out that this is a chemical imbalance? I've been prescribed those two drugs for depression, and how do they know? They just gave them to me, sort of thing. I'd like to hear the answer, so I'll
Okay.
hang up now.
There are some centers in the United States where you could have your blood tested or your urine tested and actually test the chemical deficiency. Although the chemical deficiency cannot be tested accurately 100%, a good clinician or a good psychiatrist would be able to pick up the symptoms, and that would be enough to sort of, give a trial with antidepressant medications.
Good, thank you. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I was wondering about, I have a depression problem, I know. Like, when I go into work, I'm always in a good mood and very happy and everything. But I've lost quite a few jobs because I am not always in that good mood, but I feel like it. I feel like I'm always in the good mood. But so many people can see that I'm not. And I do go through depression breakdowns quite a bit, but I feel like no one else knows. Is that a sign I should get tested?
When you are in a state of depression, that is the only time yourself and other people will pick it up. And as you said, there are good days and there are bad days. When I'm talking of a depression here today, I'm talking about somebody feeling consistently sad with some physiological features for at least more than 2 weeks at a time. That's what we call depression.
Mm-hmm. 2 weeks, a day on and off is almost normal, is it not?
Naturally.
Go ahead, please.
I would like to ask you about seasonally adjusted depression. It's a lack of sunshine phenomenon, sort of the modern day cave age where we are behind glass, we don't get ultraviolet, and the lack of ultraviolet causes the body in the wintertime to put in melatonin. And seasonally adjusted depression, I think they call it. I wanted to know what you saw out of the therapy of using Vitalights, full spectrum balanced fluorescent lighting with ultraviolet to simulate sunshine indoors.
That's so funny.
I have just come back from India after vacationing for 1 month, and I really do understand your point. Yes, we do have seasonal affective disorders, what we call, that is depression related to the time of the year. And there are more depressions in the winter compared to summertime because of all the things that you mentioned. And yes, in Vancouver today, we do have a certain kind of special light therapy available for people who have seasonal depressions.
Seasonal depressions. What am I looking for? Can't see it. Go ahead from White Rock.
Yes. Hello, Jack.
Yes.
I was just wondering if the doctor could tell me, panic attacks or anxiety attacks, are they caused by depression? And I have another thing, if she could answer, I just wanted to...
Panic attacks or anxiety attacks are not caused by depression, but as I was saying, that there is a biochemical imbalance that we think is at the root or basis of some of the depressions. More and more studies are now showing that anxiety attacks and panic attacks are also because of deficiency of this neurotransmitter that I was talking about, and there is a definite connection between depressions and panic attacks.
And a panic attack isn't necessarily caused by a phobia.
No, but a phobia, it's connected in that the phobia can be a stimulus. Certain kind of stimulus can cause panic attacks.
Go ahead, please.
Yes. I have a friend who's always talking about suicide, one way or the other, jumping off a bridge or whatever. What could I do as a friend to help her? She's already seen a psychiatrist, but she still keeps talking about this.
As I was saying to Jack earlier, some people, they may talk about suicide when if it's, let's say if it's raining or something, oh gosh, I feel suicidal today. You have to differentiate that from someone who is not functioning for 2 weeks and is talking about ending their life. I would say if your friend is in a state of depression, please take her or him to the nearest emergency room of a psychiatric department or to a psychiatrist or a family doctor.
If it's been lasting for a couple of weeks and they're talking suicide, somebody must take action.
It has to be taken seriously.
Has to be taken seriously. Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Good evening. I've been on medication now for over 2 years. And my anxiety is mostly caused when I go to my own physician because there is no patient relation with my doctor. And I'm in more trouble after I see him than when I was before.
I would say change your doctor.
That's a fairly crisp answer, obviously a common sense one too. Well, Dr. Shaila Misri, you've been not the least bit depressing, but one good thing, if somebody really is in a bad state for a couple of weeks and talking suicide, somebody close to them shouldn't hesitate to take them either to
Absolutely.
the doctor right away or whatnot.
Absolutely.
My thanks to you.
Thank you very
Best of luck
much.
at your conference, which is all sold out.
Thank you very much.
And I shall be back after the break. Tomorrow I've got an American astronaut, Colonel James Irwin. He was the guy who thought he'd found the Ark, remember, on Mount Ararat. Should be interesting. I've got Jim Fulton, NDP, politics, House of Commons. He's from Skeena. And I've got Tony Belcourt of Seneca Communications, a new Indian satellite system, on Webster tomorrow at 5 p.m. precisely.